Hola amigos, bien o no, saludos desde Medellín. Hoy el tema es el camino hacia el fluidez, or the road to fluency. And really we're going to look quickly at how far along are you on this road. This came about really because over the last couple of days I've realised that quite a few of my students and slightly more of our friends here are actually no longer here. They're already living in other countries. So they are living rather the way I am living here. The whole immersion experience of being in the new country with the new language, and what do? I mean, how does that work? Because I think if we think about that, it helps to focus us a bit on perhaps what steps we need to take to prepare, and to think about where we really are on that line, if we like, that journey to fluency, and how we're going to be able to cope with the challenges we're going to come across, depending as to where we are on that journey, if we like. So this might be a bit of a combination of some things we've spoken about in the last couple of videos, but I think it's worth looking at, because depending as to where you were able to put yourself on this line, gives you a good idea perhaps of things that you need to either revise, perhaps get better at again, not lose contact with, or new things you might need to prepare to improve or take on as a new part of your study, because that's the next thing you're going to face. So let's have a think about it. Look, here we are, just arrived in the new country. Now perhaps we're there just on holiday to start with. So at that point, maybe all we need are very basic phrases, because once we get past the airport, we're just at the hotel or the resort and there's not a lot to say, and we do a few trips and then we're back on the plane, go home. But once we make the permanent move, it gets a bit more serious in all ways, does it not? We might have to go through a lot more of the immigration questions at the airport, for instance, and that's an experience. So at this level, we might need to go a little bit beyond just normal phrases. Perhaps we need to prepare for more specific questions. Perhaps we have to fill in forms. It's a bit more detailed. Of course, once we're making a permanent move to a new country, the good news really is hopefully we're going to make quite a good connection with that place. Either, we gain a new family in the sense of husbands, wives, and all that goes with that, or we just get a much bigger group of new friends because they're now our new friends and neighbours. So that becomes our immediate new social circle, whom we're going to depend on a lot at the beginning, really to act as our interpreters, because perhaps our phrase set we've got isn't quite enough for every situation we're in. But at least by practicing all the conversations and the routine that we're going to be doing day to day, that should help accelerate our vocabulary. We can help to improve that by doing a lot of reading, and that conversation loop of conversations, reading, vocabulary, and practicing with our new family and friends obviously is going to elevate our level quite rapidly, hopefully to the point perhaps where we can even go to work or get a job of some sort. Now that again would depend, because if you're lucky and you're able to do something that you already know about, perhaps it's a familiar topic, so there's not so much new stuff to learn. But if you have to go for a new skill, you could be looking at new technical vocabulary, a lot more reading, and maybe some extra study. And of course, when we look at the routine, the other thing to think about is how we manage travel, because perhaps we have experience of this when we've been on holiday. We're just being literally the tourists while we take the bus or the train or the plane to this place, visit these things, do the tour, come back. So with things like travel, there is a point where you can do this quite easily with fairly basic phrases. A few directions, where's this, where's that, and you can get away with that. But I think we covered this one a couple of weeks back. Think about what happens when you become the tour guide, because if you're living in the country permanently, your friends and family at some point will want to come to visit you, and then that's on you. You're the tour guide now, because surely you must know everything about the new place, right? and then you have to lead that. So that's the whole thing to think about. So maybe, like I say, we've gone through our initial visits. Now we're more used to living there. We've developed our circle of family and friends. We've done a lot more conversations with them, which is improving our vocabulary. Perhaps we're looking at a job, or we've done some technical study. And eventually, all of this is starting to allow us to spend perhaps occasionally more time away from our normal circle of family friends, in with new people who we don't know. Because at this point, we're pushing much more towards literally an independence, in the sense that we can go out and meet our neighbours, our fellow citizens, in the real life, literally the real living language environment, which can be very varied. You can't predict the questions necessarily you're going to get. And obviously you don't have the help of your interpreter group, who are your family and friends you met at the beginning, because often you're going to be doing this on your own. So at this level, you have to be happy that your ability to deal with these kind of questions, and perhaps have to ask more complicated questions of your new friends and neighbours who you're meeting outside, to help you navigate the problems you might encounter. I think at that point, if you can get to this point where you can happily do this on your own without help, that's really when we're at the fluency point, because you can do it, even if you're in a brand new situation with completely new people, but you can navigate it well enough, because at that point you have enough vocabulary that you can ask useful questions to make sense of what's going on, and hopefully get a positive resolution of whatever you need to navigate. So in terms of where I think I am at the moment, well, lots of years of holidays and trips there and back. Finally, now we're here. A couple of years of a lot of conversations in this kind of area, just my family and friends here. I've done a bit more study now. I think I'm nearly at the point where I'm about to be able to, or hopefully should be able to soon, do a little bit more of the more independent travel or appointments, tasks, things like that, outside with new people who don't know me, and for whom I therefore have to be able to answer all the questions I'm likely to get, and ask them useful questions, because I won't be doing this necessarily with any sense of interpreter help, if you like. So my aim probably for the nearer future, let's say the rest of this year, is to get to a point so that if I have to become the tour guide, which I think is possibly likely within the next 12 months or so, if I get a visit from some of my friends or family back in the UK come to visit me here, can I do it? Could I take them on the tour and deal with all the questions they might have, to be able to interpret that, to ask all the other people here and cope with that in Spanish? Could I do it? At the moment, yes and no. So I think I clearly that indicates to me I've got a bit of practice to go. So I would put myself about here on the line. But think about it, it's an interesting exercise. Wherever you are with your practice of language, whereabouts are you with it? Maybe you're down hit this point, you're just doing like general phrases, you're getting really good, you're going on holiday, you've taken longer trips. Maybe you've got that connection now with family and friends in the other country you make more regular visits to. Or perhaps you're going there soon to do a job or to study. And obviously, these kind of ones, we're into like a technical vocabulary bit, so we can practice like we did with general phrases, but perhaps in a more specific context, so we can predict types of questions, vocabulary we might need. But in the end, although we can accelerate this by doing a lot of special reading and hopefully a lot of conversational practice, ultimately there is that point where we cross this kind of line into us individually, independently, meeting all of our fellow citizens with all the various questions they've got. So I think that's the challenge, really. See how we get on with that. So for me at this point, so I can comfortably cope with that, I recognise I have to do a bit of revision of some of this, and start bringing my conversations not just as what I talk about for my daily routine, but to make sure I'm covering questions that I might get asked. So questions about my job, about my studies, perhaps about where I was from before. These kind of questions I get commonly here. People ask me this just for curiosity sometimes. So can you cope with answering questions about these kind of things before we go off into more undiscovered territory, let's say. So there we go. That's an interesting exercise, I hope. Have a think about whereabouts are you with this, because we talked about different skill sets we can use, whether we deal with phrases, we try and look for questions that are going to help us in these conversations, different types of reading, ways of describing your routine, practicing your vocabulary, how you can learn that more quickly, more specifically, look at specific parts of your day-to-day stuff and focus on that, prepare for particular more technical tasks you've got coming up. All of this is kind of like a jigsaw that fits together. But in the end, if you think about, okay, well, where am I aiming to? What do I class as my point of fluency that I can say, yeah, I've done it, look, I can do this now. How close are you to that now? How much of this perhaps do you need to go back and revise so you can comfortably deal with that? And what steps do you need to take to push this a little bit further forward so you get closer to your goal later on in the year? Déjame saber en los comentarios. Until next time from Medellin, cheerio.